he's originally started in dentistry and graduated from Loma Linda in 1962, and since that date, for the last 15 years, he's found his fulfillment in full-time study and research of magnetism as it relates to health. I won't go into too much other detail, it's all in here. He has, in addition to the mattress magnets, which are described, and I guess almost everybody has those brochures, there's a few left. He has the magnetic molecular energizer devices, of which I think there's 7 around the country.
7 clinics.
Seven clinics.
24 machines.
Pardon?
24 devices. 24
devices and 7 clinics. This is a large clinical magnetic high-strength treatment device weighing 10,000 pounds, and it's operated in advanced magnetic research institutes in the 7 clinics. I give you Dr. Dean Bonlie.
It looks like we're technologically challenged here, but I think we've got it under control now. When I come down, I said, I'm going to bring down slides because the last place I went to, we tried using the laptop and the CD player, and we had nothing but trouble. So I was going to bring slides, and then he says, no, we're okay here. We got technicians and everything. So anyhow, we had a repeat. How would you like, if you broke your arm, to be able to heal it in 3.5 hours? That'd be pretty exciting, wouldn't it? That's a reality. A man who does a lot of machine work for me was out skating with his daughter, inline skating, fell, broke his ulnar off right here, stylus process off, went to the emergency, got a cast put on it, and luckily he got a good reduction, so it was good approximation. And on Monday morning, this happened on Saturday, on Monday morning he called me up and said, my hand is killing me, the pain is terrible, isn't there something you can do about it for the pain? And I said, well, come on down. And I looked at it, and his hand was all swollen up black and blue, and his cast was a little too tight to allow for the swelling, but he had a good reduction. So we put him in the MME, the large device, the 10,000 pound device, just put his hand in there, and he started to resonate. And this is why I'm bringing this up right away, because Bernie was talking about this just before we got started. If the person is young enough to where their astrocyte cells in their brain are putting out enough electricity, they will resonate when the opportunity is provided to them. And the opportunity is putting them in a strong DC magnetic field. Not a pulsed field, but a DC magnetic field. Now, a DC magnetic field means there's no variation in the field. It's just continuous. Okay? So that allows the body then to perform the resonance. And each tissue in your body has a different resonance frequency. And a matter of fact, what you had for supper will even change the resonance frequency of the tissues in your body. So when somebody says your liver is such and such a hertz frequency, resonance frequency, that's only approximate, you see. So if we allow the brain to biofeedback, to provide the frequency to make the pulsed field, okay, then we provide the energy to put the atoms at a high energy state, then we get miraculous results. And that's how we can do it in 3.5 hours. This morning I put a little girl on there, had broken her toe, and it took her about 15 minutes before she went into resonance. And she'll be healed tonight when she goes home. So this is, we always know we're going to get speed healing when we get resonance. If there's no resonance, because the person has such a toxic brain that the astrocytes can't put out enough electricity to perform resonance, then we have to go to something like what Bernie does, and that is putting in frequencies to, and hope that we hit the right frequencies to make it resonate properly. Now there's another problem with putting in frequencies. You see, the frequencies that are coming in are the carrier frequencies that cause the resonance. And then riding on those carrier frequencies are the little frequencies that are giving the messages to the cells to tell them what to do. And that's so important because that gets involved into any kind of treatment where you're using a frequency device. So that's why short periods of treatment when we're using frequency is very important. So the brain can take over, sending the right message there to telling the tissue what to do. What the actually stem cells are going to be when they grow up. Whether they're going to be muscle cells, ligaments, nerves, or what they're going to be. That is controlled by the brain. Now all that work was done by Robert O. Becker. And if you read his books, Cross Current and Body Electric, you had got all that. Now we went on a step further. He used pulsed fields for everything he did. He was did the research, which is the forerunner for the PEMF device. And we said, well, that doesn't always work because we started there first with frequencies. And we found that I could take a cancer cell and I could only resonate it for 20 seconds before it went out of resonance. So there's got to be a better way, and that's why we went to DC fields to raise the energy level up. So we're going to talk today how a DC field is going to increase the energy state in your body. Now, I've had a lot of physicists say, oh, you're nuts. You know, solid state magnetism doesn't do anything. It has to be a different field gradient, or it has to be a wave, or this. You know, when I first came upon the theory, what I'm going to tell you about today, I went down to see Dr. Coyne. Now, Dr. Coyne was the first one to ever use an MRI. And he's also the major developer of the CAT scan. And he's a brilliant MD and physicist. And I said, am I on the right track, Dr. Coyne? He looked it over and he went through it and he says, you certainly are. So then I had the courage to keep on going. And so that's, you know, there's always mentors along the way. And so that's a little bit of the history here. Now we're going to go on to magnetism. Is it necessary for life? You know, we wondered this. So the first thing we did was make a cage. It was about like so, out of mu metal. Now mu metal deflects magnetic fields. Now I was only using 1/8 inch mu metal, so I only got the Earth magnetic field down to 10% of what it is today. I put 6 nice young mice in there, all litter mates. And to my amazement, they started moving very slowly. I could even reach into the cage and roll them over, and they could hardly get up. They had that big of an effect on them, that quickly. And within 24 hours, one of them died. But you know how the rest survived? Ladies, you'll be really interested in this. They started eating huge amounts of food to get the energy from the food. And I submit that one of the reasons why a lot of us eat too much, because we're low on energy. We're running now at a very low magnetic field on this Earth. NASA has told us that within 800 years we'll be down to 0. Now we're not going to be around for that, we don't think anyhow. So why worry about it? But it is a problem. The Earth goes in cycles every 600,000 years. And we're ending one of our cycles. So we have a magnetic deficiency abroad today. Now, if you're born with a large complement of astrocyte cells in your brain, which are making a lot of electricity, which all electricity has a magnetic field as it's flowing, well, you're going to get along pretty good. But if you had a lot of fillings in your teeth and you're under a lot of stress, so that the cells in your brain pick up that mercury out of those fillings and interfere with the metabolism in those astrocyte cells, what happens? You're low on energy. Now there's other toxins too, driving down the freeway picking up tetraethyl lead, which thankfully they've outlawed. We had lead in all of our homes. This paint over here originally was probably coated with lead paint. Did you realize that for 3 feet up, you're at a toxic level according to EPA standards if those walls were painted with the old lead paint? So all of our kids and all of us from the older generation, all are full of lead. And because the event of the air rotor which made filling teeth a whole lot easier. We have a lot more fillings than any generation ever dreamed of having. And those fillings were 50% mercury. And mercury is an extreme neurologic toxin. So those poor cells in the brain aren't putting out enough electricity to make magnetic resonance like it should be happening in your body. Now, we're going to talk about, maybe we'll talk a little bit about magnetic resonance right now. To describe it, it's something like harmonic in music. Or another way of describing it is if you had a person on a swing and you gave them a little push at the right moment, it takes very little energy to get them to go higher and higher. That's somewhat like what happens in the body. You see, every so many rounds, orbits of the electrons around the atoms, they kind of almost all line up. And that makes the frequency of that atom, and that's how we tell what kind of an atom it is with a spectroscope. Each atom has a different, or each element has a different frequency. Now, you're wonderfully made so that each organ of your body has complementary resonance frequencies. In other words, one may have a resonance of 5, and another one have 25, and another one 50 or something like that. So that when the brain puts out this pulsed field, which it does continually, that's what we see in the EEG, it's targeting certain tissues that have those resonance frequencies. And the purpose of that is to get an extra amount of energy. If you don't have that, you are dependent on the energy you get from your food, period. But you can get extra energy from resonance. Matter of fact, they were amazed at the Marine Hole Observatory in New England when they found that sharks put out a lot more calories than the food they took in. And so they started observing this, and they found that they were laying down in the bottom of the ocean, in places where there are higher magnetic fields than other places. They sought out high magnetic fields so they could charge up and get a higher energy. Now, we've kind of jumped ahead of ourselves, but because in the lecture I have today, I didn't talk much about frequency. And when we're talking about pollution, here in your area, you've got multiple towers up here putting out electromagnetic waves, which interferes with the fine messages. Usually not with the resonance, because that's a high amplitude, a high voltage frequency. It's coming from your brain, but it certainly interferes with the little message frequencies. And so you're not getting the repair that you should get while you're sleeping, because you're in this electromagnetic pollution. And this is something that I was lecturing on this down in Orlando, Florida, and it was over 1,000 people in the audience. And afterwards, this big, tall, white-haired fellow came to the front, and I thought, boy, this must be the FDA. And he says, I'm vice president of Bell Telephone. And I said, well, I guess you didn't like what I had to say. Well, he says, I'm going to tell you something. I'm retired now, and we're putting away $250 million a quarter for the lawsuits we expect to get from the cell phones. So I'm just a little warning here. Use them sparingly. You won't do damage in a few minutes, but using it extensively, we're finding now in our clinics that people that use their cell phones extensively are getting tumors right here, right above the ear. Okay, we're kind of going way off the subject here, but I want to talk a little bit about essential. UCLA heard the same things that I did from Becker, and they thought, well, let's try something out. And Valerie Hunt, Dr. Hunt down there, had the physics department make a mu cage, 7 foot by 7 foot. She put 2 students in there and had them hooked up well with the EKG and ECG, and little potentiometers all over them. I wanted to see if it changed their aura. In other words, have you ever felt that people kind of drew your energy down? And she was trying to prove this. So she put them in the cage, and within a few minutes, they were sitting side by side, and they became extremely positive or negative right in this area where they were trying to draw energy off of each other. But that wasn't the thing that I was most interested in this. The muscle control in the feet first quit, and then the legs, and it crept up the body, and then she took them out because she felt she might damage them. But she said if she had left them in there 2 hours longer, they'd been vegetables. Now, that's a zero magnetic field, you see, okay? And I was using a 1/10 of the present magnetic field. So, do we need it? Yes, we got to have it. Now you say, well, what happens when the astronauts go out in space? They go into the sun's magnetic field, which is 2/3 of ours. But because it's down by 2/3, when the cosmonauts were out there for over a year, they lost most of their bone density, 80%. So that we haven't been doing long trips since then, but that's a problem unless you have an artificial magnetic field. Okay, let's talk about, well, we'll get started on the lecture. We'll be here all night at the rate I'm going. Uh-oh. There we talk about the NASA announcement, but we just talked about that, about the mouse cage. And then we need to talk about the why we know that the Earth's magnetic field is going down. We'll back up on that. No. For some reason or other, the pad on this thing isn't working tonight, so that's what we can't figure out. The Earth's magnetic field has been declining now, for all we know, since the dawn of civilization. It was 2.86, the hysteresis in the pottery in the early Babylonian Empire. So we were at 2.6. We're now down to less than 0.5. So we've lost a considerable amount of our magnetic field. The lava flows show also this, the hysteresis and the lava flows show. Hysteresis means the alignment of the magnetite crystals in any substance at the time. It could be in pottery, it could be in lava. And so the greater the degree of lava, of the alignment of the magnetite, then the greater the amount of magnetic field to do that. But the most interesting one was the last one. In the 80s, they had a program where they did drilling, coring down in the alluvial fans of the major rivers of the Earth, and because they could measure like rings on a tree. You know, there was different layers of sediment in the winter from in the summer, and so you could count the years as you go down. And interestingly enough, every time, and they were using hysteresis again, whenever they got to the magnetic field went to zero or reversed temporarily, there was a layer of fossils. And we've had 9 layers in other words, since water's been flowing down the rivers, we've had 9 layers, or shall we say 9 layers of fossils in the 9 geological ages. So are we headed for extinction? Well, probably mostly, unless we somehow find a way of supplementing.
Does everything die at that period?
It doesn't all, like right now, there's a huge area in the southern Atlantic which is reversing already, and but there's nobody living there, and so it's not a problem. And so there'll be areas that are going to be still, like in the bottom of the ocean, there's some really strong areas of magnetism, and those will be still there, and life could still exist down in the ocean. And so I'm talking about on land, though, it could be a real problem, because your magnetosphere protects you from cosmic radiation. That's the main purpose of it there. And without that magnetosphere, we are all going to get radiated with cosmic radiation, which isn't going to help the health at all. See if we can get this thing working. It's being obstreperous today. I talked about that already. Now we need to talk about theory. There's a formula in physics. It's called the Lamar frequency formula. And it simply states that the formula simply states that if you increase the magnetic field in which a hydrogen atom exists, you'll increase the velocity on the orbiting valence electron. Now, each electron has its own magnetic field because it has a charge and it's spinning. So there's electron spin and then there's electron orbit. So you've got these little electrons going around like this. Now, the formula says if you increase the magnetic field, you'll increase the velocity proportionate to the amount of increase in magnetic field. So it's going faster. Now, this is a charged particle here going through a magnetic field. So the charge increases. And in a magnetic pad, the strongest one like Bernie's using here, it would be 30 times faster orbiting electrons in the body, and they're cutting 30 times more magnetic field, so it's 30 times 30 increase in charge on those electrons. And the same formula says this leads to precession. Precession means wobble or molecular action. So what we're getting here then, this higher charged particle then is actually being attracted and repelled from other atoms and at a greater intensity, so it's making that atom begin to vibrate. And what happens when that happens? It's the same thing happens when you heat a solution to make a chemical reaction happen. You're putting energy waves in there which make the atoms bounce together and they share electrons. When they hit each other, then they share the valence electrons and you have a molecule. And molecules make enzymes and tissue and everything else. So this is the basis of life. So you can enhance life, or you can kill life by increasing or decreasing. Now, it gets more complicated. It should be nice if we just give people magnetism, everything's going to work out great, but then there's a problem here. Here it just shows sharing, the atom sharing electrons. Now, when you lay down to sleep tonight, in the first couple hours of sleep, you're going to produce most of your human growth hormone for the day. That makes your cells divide. So cellular division happens in the first couple hours of sleep tonight. That's when you get your cellular repair. Now, if you work out in the middle of the afternoon, you'll get another shot of a human growth hormone, and you'll get some more growth there. But normally, most people are getting most of their growth in the first couple hours of sleep. Now, you're laying on a bed here in the northern hemisphere. The magnetic field is coming out of the southern hemisphere, coming down through your body to the sky. So it's coming from the sky and going into the earth. The earth is negative, the sky is positive, if you're talking about direction of magnetic field. Now, if the electrons on the atoms in your body were going clockwise, which is this way, their magnetic field would be bucking the magnetic field of the earth. In other words, like the two little dogs going against each other. So what happens then? If the magnetic field is going counterclockwise, then they speed up, proportionate, just like the Lamar formula says. But he said if you reverse the sign, or reverse the direction, then you actually slow them down proportionately. So you can speed up and slow down the electrons, and you can speed up and slow down the metabolism of your body. Now, why am I going to all this? What's the purpose of this? Well, when I place a magnet here on my hand, the magnetic field goes in, and it's got to go around back to the other side to come back around, doesn't it? Magnetic fields are continuous. They come out of one side of a magnet and go back to the other side. So when I put a magnet on here, even though I may put the negative side here, then all around it's the positives, all around it, where the magnetic field is coming back around. So what we're doing is speeding up some electrons and slowing some down. We're enhancing some metabolism, and we're slowing some down. Now, this gets to be a problem. because if you slow down your electrons, you have a more of a problem than you can imagine. Let's just get into this. This thing is not gonna. Let's try using this thing. No, still won't work. I don't know what we did to kill that, but we sure did. Okay. When you take and slow down the valence electrons, the first thing is affected is the mitochondria, because that's where you're having a great deal of electron transfer and in the Krebs cycle. And when you have that stopped, you're not making ATP. Now, ATP is the high energy compound that runs most of the chemical reactions in your body, a large percentage of them. And the one that's very important is running the sodium-potassium pump, which charges up the cell wall, so you have a difference in charge inside of the cell than outside of the cell. So what you have here then is no charge, so the oxygen isn't pulled into the cell. The oxygen is necessary to maintain that cell life. So as that charge begins to drop, the body says, hey, we got oxygen deprivation down there in the cells down there. And that's all signaled up to biofeedback to the brain. And what does the brain do? Oh, it says we'll have to compensate. So what does it do? It sends down a very strong electromagnetic field. And that compensates. Now, that's all good on short term, as long as you got enough energy to keep sending more electricity down there. But this is the same thing as acupuncture. You're creating an emergency, and that emergency is doing the healing, okay? Now, one of the rules of acupuncture, that those of you who do it, know that you don't do it continuously, do you? You do it on a intermittent basis, once a week or once every 2 weeks. Otherwise, you run down the chi, or the vitality. And this is the problem we have with applying magnets on a continual basis that are bipolar. In other words, magnets against this tissue which are making loops around and giving both positive and negative. And so when you see somebody using all these magnetic products today, warn them, hey, just use that sparingly for your problems and then quit using it. And if you're not getting satisfaction from a short-term use, then try something else. Because I have people coming to me after lectures, and I lecture many, many lectures a year, and they come up and say, that's why I can't get out of bed anymore. I've been wearing this magnet here on my back, or I've been wearing it on my shoulder, and I was, I had lots of energy when I started. Now I have no energy left. And this is the problem of a bipolar field, okay? It will work on short term. It's good for relief of pain because it's the same as acupuncture. Acupuncture works. So remember, that's not, we can't say it's all bad. It's just got to be used correctly. Now, when I got involved in this, to prove that we were doing the same thing as the acupuncture, we measured electrical flow and we measured blood flow, because those are the two things that acupuncture really does very well. But Dr. Saul Liss said, well, the inventor of the Liss simulator, says, well, look there's some other things that I think are going on too. And so he started measuring the neurochemicals in the brain. And this is what he found. There was a 45, just from placing a little magnet here on the Hoku point on the hand, you got a 45% increase in beta endorphins, 24% increase in serotonin, 15% increase in ACTH, which is the forerunner of adrenaline, and 12% reduction in cortisol levels. Now, he presented that at the World Pain Conference in Geneva. It was well accepted. It was good research. Now, as you can see, these are all things that happen in an emergency. They are also all things that happen when you do acupuncture. That's why you do it sparingly, not all the time. So if you don't learn anything from this lecture tonight, I hope you learn that bipolar fields are something that should be used sparingly. And this is what we just talked about. And there's also, you know, we have one of the people that really got into magnetic beds early and using magnets, Dr. Philpott, and he was telling it was him and Nikon was the only two when I got into this, and he was telling people to only use the magnetic pad for 2 months and then take the pad off because you deplete the adrenals. Well, sure enough, you were depleting the adrenals because you're keeping these people in emergency response all along. He had a bipolar pad as well as Nikon did. So the other problem is when you put a magnet on here, you're diverting energy from other parts of the body to that area where you place the magnet. So you have to be very careful about that. Boy, we get this. Now, with this in mind, we did a major study at the University of Virginia. This is a double-blind, placebo-controlled, and the whole thing. It cost $1.5 million. And this study showed the difference between a bipolar field and a unidirectional field like the Earth. The top pad is the pad we make, which is unidirectional. We make it so it goes under the mattress and has 200 times more volume of magnets in it, so that you get a unidirectional field, only enhancing the Earth field. And you can see on this fibromyalgia study that the pain levels just keep decreasing, whereas the Nikon pad, which is bipolar, has a very quick response in reduction of pain, but after 6 weeks it starts losing it, and by 12 weeks they're back to where they started. So, and interesting enough, the tender points on the back on the Nikon pad were still better at the end, but the ones on the front were so much worse that the one overbalanced the other one. So the patients said their pain was worse. So, just kind of a little recap here. You increase the geomagnetic field, you increase electron speed and proteins and protons, and you increase the molecular activity. Now, early on, we worked with athletes before we got involved with the general public, and we found that they had a 30% increase in VO2 max. Now, that's pretty big for an athlete. And we had placebo beds and we had real ones, and we did a proper study. They had a 20% increase in strength and an 80% reduction in post-exercise soreness. And as you can read there, faster healing times from injury up to 4 times. The resting heart rates went down by 20%. I did this study, and then Mr. Canada came to me one day and he says, I think this is a bunch of bunk. I'm a physics teacher. And he says, I'll tell you what, if you give me one of those things to try, I'll know whether it's bunk or not. And I said, what are you going to do? He says, well, if my resting heart rate don't change when I do more work, because I'm going to have more oxygen, I know that you're enhancing chemical reactions because the blood's picking up more oxygen. So 6 weeks, he tried it. He was training for the North American Championships. And in 6 weeks, he increased his number of reps he could do by 41%, and there was absolutely no increase in his heart rate. So he is a believer. But it's something like, we're talking about, it's hard to convince a classic physicist. One of my best friends is a classic physicist. As a matter of fact, he wrote the physics book for the area in which we live, for the high school. He's a PhD in physics, and he always said, this can't be static fields, or can't do anything. That's impossible. So one day, his wife came into my office and says, hurry, get one of those magnetic pads. We're going to put it in the bed. I said, well, your husband never allow that. He's gone. Don't. I said, well, why do you want it? He says, well, he's on blood pressure medication, and he's, it's not setting well with him. He's crabby, and he just is not any good anymore. And sex life was gone, and all of that. And so I said, well, he'll see it. She said, no, he's never made the bed in his life. So, so we took it over, put it under the bed, and 3 months later I was at a banquet with him, and he was sitting next to me, and he was really quiet. He's usually talkative, but he was really quiet. I said, what's wrong? Well, he says, I just came from the doctor, and she took me off my high blood pressure medication. I said, why? How come? He says, you know how come. Because his wife had really given it to him. And so anyhow, yes, it does lower blood pressure. Matter of fact, Norm Shealy right now is doing studies for me at his little university there in Missouri. And he has found conclusively that, yes, it drops the blood pressure, and also does some wonderful things with the EEG, the brain waves, and puts them in a much better state. So, and the last big part that we're doing in the studies there is free radical reduction. And if that comes out like we think it's going to come out, that'll be great news. Anyhow, let's go on to PMS.
What is the difference between the magnetical field and the Niken pad?
And they have little magnets like that, and so the magnetic field can go in the body and turn around and come back out. So the body is getting approximately 40% positive and 60% negative. Whereas ours, the magnets are all together. It's like laying on one big magnet, so the magnetic field goes through the body and returns outside of the bed.
That's the unidirectional.
Unidirectional, yes. Yeah. Okay, and that's what Bernie's talking about. See, what we're providing is the energy. We're getting those atoms at a high energy state, and then he puts in a frequency which makes things happen at a very, very rapid rate. Now, if the person is young enough and vital enough, we don't have to do that. But when they get old or toxic, we have to.
How do you know if the person is resonant or not?
Well, they can feel it. It feels like it's vibrating. They actually feel it. Yeah, that was an interesting comment here. There's a young fellow that was working for me, and he went off to work for Canada Tire Company, a big company, and a bunch of stuff fell on him and herniated his L4, and just between L3 and L4. And he was gimping around, couldn't get around. So I said, why don't you come in and get fixed? And so he did, and he laid in there and he says, what the world's going on in my back? It feels like it's vibrating. Do you have a vibrator in this thing? And he did that for about 4 hours. And then it stopped. He said, how come it stopped? I said, because you're healed. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, no, I get up and try it out. And sure enough, it was healed.
Was that the MME or not?
That was the MME, the big machine, yeah. Early on, before we had the MME, we used the magnetic mattresses with strong magnets right on the herniated place, and we'd have them wear that for a few hours a day. And we were getting quite good results. We treated some quarterbacks in your NFL, and so that can work too. Okay, PMS. I had one of our famous women doctors in Canada do a study for me, and she took her worst PMS patients that were actually immobilized for part of the month and put them on the magnetic pad and see what would happen. All 6 had tremendous alleviation of system. Matter of fact, 3 of them went back to work because they didn't have a problem anymore, and the others were sufficient so that they didn't have to take pain pills or anything, and their attitude was good. So yes, it works for PMS, and every man in this house that has a young wife needs to be buying one of these things for his wife, if she has PMS. Of course, most women don't. Down to chronic fatigue. I had a young lady come into my office. I say young, she was 40. And she says, I've been to 17 physicians in this town. I said, well, what kind of physicians were they? Well, she says, all kinds of them. Even the last 4 of them were alternative physicians. And I said, well, did they do you any good? She says, nope. She says, I'll tell you how bad I am. I'm allergic to all but 7 foods. I'm allergic to all all chemicals. I have to take all the chemicals out of my house and the rugs and everything out of my house. He says, I can only be up for 2 or 3 hours a day. And he says that life stinks. He says, I've lost my husband, I've lost my job. And he said, every doctor I went to, I've got worse. And so I asked her what the alternative doctors did, and I found out that one had taken out the amalgam fillings, and in a way that was not acceptable, and that made her a lot worse. And the next one gave her vitamins, and that didn't help. And the next one gave her chelation until she lost all of her money, EDTA chelation. And the last one tried hormones. These are the alternative doctors. And so when she came to me, she was, as you can see, quite discouraged. I said, open your mouth. Oh, she said, I have no fillings in there, so they don't have to worry about that. I said, how many did you have? She said, I had 23. And I said, when they chelated you, did they give you any DMPS? No. It says EDTA. Any DMSA? No. I said, well, they didn't take out the mercury. That's your problem, is your mercury. And so I, okay. I said, we'll fix you up, no problem. And she looked at me kind of funny. I said, you need the strongest magnetic mattress, and you need just 500 milligrams of DMSA a night before you go to bed on it. That's all you need. That's only a quarter dose. And she said, you really are crazy. And I said, no. I said, it'll work. We've done it many times before. And she says, well, I got no money, so forget it anyhow. I said, no, you pay me when you get well. And she looked at me like I was really crazy. And as she went out the door, she says, do you know, you better not be playing with me, because if this doesn't work, I'm committing suicide. So I said, don't worry about it. I'm not worried. And so out the door she went. The boys put the magnetic pads in there, and I made sure that she had somebody to put them on her bed at home. And a month later, I got a check in the mail. So I called up and I said, what's going on? She says, I'm back on my old job. And she says, as a matter of fact, he says, I'm having to put the rugs back in my house. And 3 months later, she paid for all the rest of it, and says, I have a boyfriend, I'm living a normal life, and my job's going great. Now, all those allergies disappeared, getting the mercury out of her brain. What does the magnetic pad do? This is what we want to talk about next. The magnetic pad, you remember we talked about enhancing the chemical reactions in the mitochondria so it makes more ATP. You see, we normally run at about 58 millivolts on the differential on the cell wall, on a muscle cell, on nerve cells. Now, at that rate, calcium can go in and out of the calcium channels like it's supposed to. And when we're under stress, we bring calcium in, and when we're rested up, the calcium comes back out and goes back in the bones. But if there isn't enough calcium around, the cells aren't, shall we say, wise enough to keep out other positive ions. Mercury, lead, nickel, cadmium, arsenic, aluminum, all of those things are pulled into the cell. Now, unfortunately, for those to come back out through the calcium channel, it takes about 100 to 110 millivolts of differential on that cell wall. And you don't normally operate at that. And so what happens when we lay them on the magnetic pad, we get those high voltages because the mitochondria is working at full blast. In other words, we're enhancing those chemical reactions in the mitochondria, so it's making a lot of ATP. The ATP runs the sodium, potassium up, so the charge goes high. So that's how we clean them out. Now, we've done studies, we've proven, we're going to show you here in a minute, that this actually does happen. And I gave this lecture in Orlando, and this lecturer that is well known, he was a big chelator, came up and said, I don't believe that. And I said, well, try it out. He said, well, I've had over 300 chelations, and I've taken DMPS, and I've taken DMSA, and I've taken all these things, and I know that I don't have anything. I've tested myself with doctor's data over and over and over again. I said, try it out. I said, don't argue with me. Just try it out. So he did. And he tried it out, and guess what? To his amazement, he had a lot of mercury coming out in his urine, just from raising the intercellular potential up, even though he'd used all of these good chelators. So this is the chelating thing. Now, where does this come into? And we need to talk about this a little bit. Mercury is one of the major factors in autism today. From the vaccinations, from fish, and a lot of other places. But mercury is a major thing in autism. And guess what we did? We ran a study in Southern California. We took 25 kids and put them on the superbed, the strongest one like he's got, and gave them 250 milligrams of DMSA. And in 3 weeks, they had a major personality turnaround to where they could sit and be interviewed. So this is the autism answer. That's why we're now spending a huge amount of money. We're doing a big double-blind study to prove this up conclusively. And this is being done by Dr. Cindy Snyder in Phoenix. She's an autism specialist. She has over 500 autistic kids in her practice. So that's coming down the road. The relief of insomnia. 91% of the people have some relief from insomnia. In arthritis, there was 96% had 25% at least, and 38% had complete relief from arthritis from using the magnetic pads. This is interesting. We were trying to find something about why we're getting higher oxygen levels, because we were testing athletes and the oxygen levels are going up in their blood. And so we hired a expert in this dark field microscopy, and we did 120 people, and we put them on the magnetic pad. First of all, we did a blood, took a picture of their blood like you see here, and then we put them on the magnetic pad and checked it again. And 120 out of 120 had a reduction in the Rellua factor, or clumping, or whatever you want to call it. Here you can see a tired truck driver here, very, very, very serious clumping. And over here on the right-hand side, you can see what he had looked like after 20 minutes. Now, why is this important? Well, you get your cells all clumped up like that. They're not picking up much oxygen. You have them out there free-floating, they're going to be picking up a lot more oxygen. It also shows that the charge on the cell wall has gone way up, so they're repelling each other. See, the cell wall is covered with glycoproteins, and it's very sticky on a red blood cell. So it needs to have a strong charge to repel the adjoining cells. We did a study to see if whether this lasted. So we took 10 people and ranging in age from 80 to down to the youngest was 21, and we found that over a period of 4 months here, they had an increase in oxygen saturation in their blood. This is at 7 o'clock at night, not in the morning after they've just been sleeping on the pad, but at 7 o'clock at night. So we were enhancing the actual structure of the cells also. Now the resting heart rate was down by 7%, so that indicates that's a reciprocal of the oxygen saturation. So really these people were about on the ratio, it turns out to about 3 or 4% better in oxygen saturation than they were before, even at 7 o'clock at night. This is just talking about those fibromyalgia studies. We won't go into that. We did 2 studies, 2 double-blind studies, one in Canada and one below. The one in Canada showed 2.4 times more improvement than the standard treatment in that study. Now we talked about these excretion levels of toxin. Now this is a study done by Dr. Johnson down in Dallas, and he had used the magnetic pad, and he did a baseline had them off all seafood for 5 days, and then you put them on the magnetic pad for one night, and they got an increase in these levels of these toxic metals by the amount you can see there. Then we, oops, we got.
How many Gauss was that?
That was the strongest one, the same one as his. Okay, and then we added 500 milligrams of DMSA, and it went up to, as you can see, mercury excretion was 45% more over baseline, and lead 80%, which just showing what we're talking about here.
We usually start with 10.
Yeah, well, I'm about to wind down here, lose my voice. This just shows the kind of magnetic field the bed has. And as you can see, it's coming, those arrows are going the wrong way, by the way. All those arrows are wrong. So we shouldn't be looking at that one, I guess. Here it shows what, in between each magnet you have a peak of positive. Now, that peak of positive is where the lines of flux return back on. And if you're sleeping close to the magnets, you're getting those peaks of positive, and it sets off the emergency response. So if you put the magnetic pad under your mattress, say you had a Philpott magnetic pad, if you put it under your mattress, you're getting a proper magnetic field. It's not very strong, but at least it's the right kind of magnetic field. Even the Nikon gives you, enhances the, if you put it under the mattress, enhances it by about, well, about 20%, the Earth's magnetic field. So it always should go under the mattress if you have a magnetic pad already. And now we make them with, so that the magnets are right together. There's only an eighth of an inch between them, so we get a less peak and stronger magnetic fields than this one we're showing you right there. And now to the end of, this is the magnetic molecular energizer, and this is what we make them now with cowlings on them. This is one of the earlier models. Now, as you see the white thing going around the back there, the back, that's solid iron. And so what we're doing is we have a coil below and a coil above, and it's a big C-frame. And so we're driving the magnetic field in a circle with this part of the C where we put the patient. So you have a unidirectional field here going through the body in the correct way. And this is the thing that does all these marvelous things. And I have a lot more slides, but I can tell you quickly that we're give you an example. The judge from, one of the judges from Anchorage sent his wife down, and she had congestive heart failure so bad that the leg tissue was all the way to the ground, over her shoes and down on the ground. And she came on oxygen in a wheelchair. In 12 days, she was off her oxygen, her flesh was back in her shoes, and she went off to Italy and spent 5 weeks walking around Italy. Came back and says, I want some more of that. So I treated her for another 12 days, and at the end of that 12 days, we had her ejection fraction up to 39. And she was at 11. So what we're doing here, we've done many since then, because we've opened up a cardiac clinic down in Toledo, Ohio. And we're treating all the types of heart disease. We're getting collateral circulation around the blockages. We're getting new muscle. And so that's a very exciting part. But probably what a lot of people think is even more exciting is we've treated over 100 cerebral palsy children now. And growing new brain for them and new function. And this is a big deal. Now we're in the middle with this device here in FDA trials on what we call phase 3 trials. And we've been through phase 1, phase 2, and we're on phase 3, and we are doing a diabetic neuropathy study. We're halfway through it. It's working. We're growing the nerves back in the feet. And this is one of the reasons I want to mention this, because we need more people with diabetic neuropathy. Finish the study. We're halfway through, and we need more patients. So if you know of anybody with diabetic neuropathy, we pay them to come and be treated. They don't have to pay. We pay them. Okay? So now the downside is, of course, half of them are on placebo machines and half of them are on the active, you see? But we guarantee the patient that if they're on the placebo machine, that in 6 months that we will do the active machine and treat them. So everybody gets treated. It's just that some of them have to get treated twice. So that's a downside. But if the people aren't working, it's not that bad. We've also started a low back pain study. These are all FDA approved, IRB approved studies, and that's ongoing now. And so anybody with low back pain, we also treat them for free. But some of them are not going to be on the active machines, or some are going to be on the placebo machines. So anyhow, if they have the time, it's well worth it. Now.
Do they have to go to Ohio? Is that Jim Roberts?
No. That's just the only cardiac clinic we have. The clinics we have are on the back of the brochure there. There's one in Seattle, and one in Tucson, one in Detroit, Toledo, just north of Baltimore, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And then I have the one in Canada. Now, the one in yes.
On these treatments, when you objectively reach cure, how are you then measuring whether or not the patient stays cured after treatment?
Yeah, we bring them. We're using a neurometer to test that, and neurometer, of course, you can tell whether you're getting nerve conduction or whether you're not. And so we test them before, and then after, and then 6 months later. And interesting enough.
Years, and test it all further down the road or planning to?
Well, we are in our pilot study. We waited 3 years, and it held for 3 years. So that's as far as we've gone. So that's, but there is a problem, and we're finding that in this bigger study. People will go and go off the, shall we say, go off the wagon and start eating like they shouldn't, and their sugar levels going up, and you can kill those nerves again, just like you did the first time. So,
Have you found any problems that you did previously with the use of the bipolar magnets, as far as if the patient has some symptomatic relief over X period of time, and then all of a sudden now the problem actually is worse? Have you run into any of those situations at all?
yes, we've run into that, and we.
The same sort of a thing, that the symptoms are actually worse?
You know, there are slower healers because they've depleted their vitality, and we've run into that in the study already.
And then you excluded other things such as your toxic metals and whatnot?
You know, well, toxic metals don't usually go to the feet. They usually go to the heart of the brain, usually.
Dean, let's just share this with you. There's a famous athlete for the Los Angeles Clippers. If you remember, I don't want to say his name because of non-disclosure. He became paralyzed for a few minutes in the court playing against another team, and he lost all movement, etc., for about a minute, 2 minutes. And they wanted to do surgery on him, and being a patient of mine, he said, no, I have one doctor I'm going to consider before I go and do surgery, because he didn't want to have that done. But the medical, the professional athletes medical group said you have to have surgery, otherwise you can't play professionally again. Well, he came in there, and we put him on a negative field magnetic pad that I had. This was in the 80s, earlier, like around 84, 85. And we put him on a negative field using, from Downley magnets, in Sonoma. And I worked on him with cranials, and within a few minutes we had him moving again. And he's now normal. He's a broadcaster on television. You recognize him. And he never needed surgery. And he has full mobility, function again. And this is one of many cases we did. Howie Long had a disc herniation. We put him on magnetic field, and in 1 day he was walking again. The stories I could share with you what we did with magnetics is unbelievable. We restored energy back to thyroids that were completely surgically removed within 10 minutes of using a positive and using a magnetic negative on the back and conducting.
You should use positive on the front, by the way.
Yeah, positive. That's what
I'll give you a little example here. We've taken people, like when they have broken arms and stuff, and they'll be all black and blue. It takes about 2 hours, and all of the bruising is gone. had an accident. I had two. When I was developing this, I had two MRIs, two big MRIs, and I foolishly got too close to one of them with a desk. Fortunately, there was nobody in the MRI, and the desk had too much metal in it, and it ripped that desk right off over my head and went into the MRI in many pieces. And as it went back like this, it dislocated my thumb. And I had a patient coming for that MRI, so I had to get that thing cleaned out. So I had to use a big winch and everything to pull the pieces out because they're in there so tight. Anyhow, I worked in that MRI for 2 hours. I had no pain, no swelling in my thumb that had been dislocated. When I finished, we just put it on the magnetic pad, and overnight all that went down on the strong pad. And she went to work the next day. So she didn't believe that this could be, because her husband was chiding her about it. And so she didn't sleep on it the next night, and the next morning her face was all swollen and her eyes were swollen shut again. So magnetism does stop the release of histamine and the swelling and the bruising. And we did a study with a plastic surgeon over in Grand Junction, and he found the same thing. He could stop the bruising on his patients if they went immediately onto magnetic pad. There's another thing here we're talking about, and ideally in the future, when somebody has a stroke, they would go on in one of these machines here, because they wouldn't, we could repair that tissue. You would never have the results of the stroke. There'd be very little, let's put it that way.
How many hours do they have before it's too late?
Well, if I can get them even within the first month, I have a very good chance of restoring all the function. And so the longer they go, the harder it is to restore the function. But we've treated them 20 years after the fact and got improvement in function. That's one of the things we do. We do Parkinson's, MS, and we've been doing a lot of research on spinal cords. And we're getting some pretty, well, the last one he did was a cowboy, landed on his head, got bucked off, and he had a what we call a T10, T11 herniation, not a herniation, but a break. It was pinched off, and they said he would never walk again. And in 1 month, took him 5 weeks, he walked out of my place. So, and that was three years after the fact. Yeah.
Where do you place the pad? Is it, you say, under the mattress?
Always under the mattress.
What about the springs that are under that? Is that
It doesn't seem to bother. We seem to get just as good a field, whether it's if there's springs in the mattress, it conducts the field up through it even better, so you get a stronger field.
So then how much, what is the Gauss, what is the rating that comes up on top of the mattress?
We measure everything at 8 inches above the mattress, and when we say 20 Gauss or 30 Gauss, this is a measurement of 8 inches above the mattress, which would be midways in your body.
What determines negative or positive?
It's just the direction the magnetic field is going. The sky is positive, the Earth is negative. And use a magnetometer. In other words, you set your magnetometer to what you know you already have, and then you measure everything from that. And you get that from, you can go and get a magnetometer survey. They'll tell you exactly what the magnetic field of the Earth is at any point. We quit using that. I'm president of the North American Academy of Magnetic Therapy, and they voted to stop using those terms because Philpott and Rawls and Davis switched it around from the scientific determination and started calling the south the north and got everybody confused, and so now we just use positive and negative. We don't use north and south anymore at all.
In your thing, it shows the pad on top of the mattress.
No, it's under.
It shows box spring, mattress, and then magnetic pad.
That's the other type.
Oh, that's the other type.
That's the other type if you read that.
That's the unacceptable type.
That's right. Pardon?
How much are they?
The pads? What I have done is given you the price list, wholesale price list for you guys. If you order this week, I don't want to be commercial about this thing, but I'm giving you the wholesale price.
Are you in Canada?
Yes.
So this is you on the back here.
Yeah, that's right.
I gotta figure out how to send my meeting.
They lose 6% of their power in 40 years.
In 40?
40 years, yeah.
So do you sleep on the bed then for the rest of your life?
That's right.
How does this affect animals that sleep on the bed?
How does it affect animals?
Sleep on the bed.
Well,
They actually love it.
they jump on there and they growl at you if you try and take them off. So,
No, animals do heal faster
What?
with magnetic fields.
I'll take a mattress. Well, the ones we make now, they go 2 stories up. So,
You need 4 football players to carry the mattress up and put it on top of your bed. I'm going to tell you,
no, they like the strongest one we make. You know, no, they're about that thick. 2 of them together. It's 2 layers. The strongest one we make is what we call the super bed. And if you have a king-size bed, it's 2 layers on it. Comes in 4 pieces, and each piece weighs 95 pounds.
my question is, how thick should the mattress be on top of the bed?
Oh, you can have it any thickness you want.
Do you mind if we close the meeting to an order, but people can
Sure,
ask questions?
sure.
Okay, what we're going to do here is close the meeting off and bid you all a good month till we meet again. But Dean will be here for a while to answer your questions. Ruth. Yes.
Could you, and they'll send it, and
On what they've been running into in the last month, or what they're researching, or what they'd like to know about that somebody else might be researching. And so we actually start with a wide open forum like that. And I was thinking, this group is kind of like a device for gathering information and then trying to integrate it into some coherent picture. And it's not easy to do because there's so many things happening in the field of science and medicine. But we try to do it anyway. And tonight we're going to be out on the edges, I think, of new therapies that are not widely known even by people who are doing alternative medicine. So who knows where we'll end up. But anyway, that's lost my train of thought now. Let me just think a minute. So I guess what we want to do next here is just do our thing and open up the forum. Got some reports I want to be sure and get in before we get to our speaker. Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to give a little plug here. First of all, for those of you that are new, we have a great website, and Ryan's not here tonight, but it's smartlifeforum.org, and for at least the last year or more, we have the complete newsletters. The complete newsletters explaining all of the people. smartlifeforum.org. So remember to write that down. Plus, we have the biographies of the people, what they talked about, and if you find a subject that you're interested in, you can just give me a call. My cards are there, as well as some of the 55 videos that I've shot here over the last 5 years, and this group has been going on a lot longer than that. Then I also want to remind you that everybody pick up a copy of the New Living Expo brochure here, a little booklet, which is going to be happening next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we have many of the illustrious folks in our group who are going to be speaking there individually and on panels, including Dr. Phil Miller. We're going to have Bern Friedlander, Dr. Richard Cunyon, who's a member of our group, several others that are listed right there on the front. But Sandy forgot to let everybody know that I'll be speaking on Sunday at 11 o'clock on getting alkaline and the importance of alkalinity for lung health. So the videos are available right there. If you decide to get something, and if you want to order something, I say go on the web. Thank you.
Okay, in case you missed that, it's getting alkaline, right?
That's right.
You say it all at once, it sounds very mysterious. Okay, while we're on the subject of announcements, just one second. I wanted to give you more good news about our incorporation efforts led by our outstanding board member Dick Mata. We did get our official certification letter from the powers that be, and so we're now incorporated as a
Foundation.
yeah, as a nonprofit organization in the state of California. So think about it. Okay, there's a lot of work in this. So what this means is that you can now give us money and deduct it. And you know, there's a couple of people who've been doing this. One of them did it again, and he asked me not to mention his name, but you know, I do appreciate it, Jake. Okay, Mike, did you want to say something? Okay, let me get to that.
Just very briefly, for those of you who have not seen it, as you know about the Vioxx and Merck, in the Wall Street Journal this week, there is another extensive article about Merck's Fosamax. Now, many women that I know are using Fosamax, and apparently what it's creating is a jaw disease where people are having to eliminate their teeth and grind their gums and everything else. And that also, the other, I think there's another one, Boniva and Treviva or something, that are put out by other firms. Now, I have not seen it in other newspapers, so I think it's worthwhile to understand. Because when my wife went to have a back operation, the doctor said, well, you should be taking Fosamax. Now, this was 3 years ago, and I said to the doctor, Doc, I've heard an awful lot of very bad things about it. I said, our doctors in our group in Palo Alto suggest they should not be taking it. Dr. John Lee suggests that it's absolutely dynamite. So be aware of it, because there are other ways in which bone can be built. And I would refer to Dr. Phil Miller's absolutely outstanding book that he did for Life Extension on building bone.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let me take this gentleman and come back to you. Are you going to talk about that? Okay.
It's not just Fosamax, it's the other bisphosphonates, including Zomega, which is a powerful one. If you're having any dental work done and you're on Fosamax or Zomega or one more, then you get necrosis of the jaw, which is very serious, and it's happened to about 5% to 10% of the people. So the most important thing is they should not have any dental work beyond the cleaning done if they're taking any of the bisphosphonates. And there's one more, Actinol, I think, is the third. Fosamax, Actinol, Zomega,
and Boniva.
And that one. So any bisphosphonate.
Mike, where was this report?
Well, I've been reading about it the last 3 months. In fact, I was on Zomega for a while for that same purpose. And then I didn't do any dental work, so didn't have that problem. But I found out about it 6 months ago, and they're just reporting it now.
Could we get that article put on the website?
That'd be a good idea.
If you go on the website and put in bisphosphonates and necrosis of the jaw, that'll work.
Okay, if you Google, I guess you could get it. Now, if you put in Fosamax plus dental work plus necrosis
problems.
Yeah, whatever. Now, which is the is Fosamax the one that they're now claiming? Let me think. Avista? What are they saying about it?
They're saying, actually they've been talking about this. You know, I always get these two classes mixed up too, so you guys may even know more than me. But Avista, they've known this for a while. It's a SERM, selective estrogen remodulation, something or other. And what they've found is that these drugs seem to have an affinity for bone, but also block estrogen at the breast, so they seem to help in breast cancer because they're blocking the estrogen uptake in the breast, but increasing it in the bones. So it has that effect. And it's probably better than tamoxifen, which I think is a god-awful drug anyway. So.
That's a positive thing.
Right. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, now let's see, where are we at? Who's, yes, sir.
Yeah, my mother just recently was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and it's very interesting, your comment, because I was going to ask here if there was somebody that has found a good supplemental formula that has worked for them, and also I wanted some opinion on Fosamax, which I think you covered. She has a friend in Las Vegas that was on Fosamax and apparently had an immediate heart condition. I don't know what kind of a heart problem it was, but her physician said, you need to stop it. So if anybody has found a good supplemental formula or something that has worked for them, I'd appreciate to.
I think on our website, Building Bones by Stan Field, I think it's on the website, Building Bones by Stan Field, a member of ours here.
Yeah, we have a video on that too.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sharon, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I have osteoporosis, and I've been taking strontium and also Dr. Bonnie's magnetic mattress, and my bone increased 4.5% in my spine.
All right.
Yeah, I hear good things. Strontium is one of the new things that has just come out and has been pretty well, received. I think in the scientific community there's some consensus that strontium is very helpful. Now, what I wanted to ask, though, I have a question. About a year ago, or not a year ago, more like 7 or 8 years ago, we had John Lee speak here a couple of times. Wonderful man who really put natural progesterone on the map and really introduced the world to the whole concept of bioidentical hormones. And one of the things that John Lee used to say about progesterone was that it increases bone growth. And a lot of the drugs that conventional medicine uses slow the loss of bone, but they don't increase bone growth. And there's two kinds of, processes involved in bone replacement. Bones replace themselves like every other tissue in the body. And there's one osteoclast and osteoblast. One of them takes bone out, and the other puts new bone back in. And progesterone, said John Lee, was the only thing that he knew about that would cause new bone to be formed. And he had some very good research on this. But then later, I heard reports that maybe this didn't hold up. Now, does anybody know what the story is on this? Is progesterone still considered to be something that causes the formation of new bone or not? Does anybody else know?
It's rate defect, that is one of the factors.
Yeah.
K1 and K2 is also another important disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had an interesting patient that wasn't 92 years old and has severe loss of bone in the spine and the hip. And one of the doctors in the Bay Area put him on 50,000 units of vitamin D and completely reversed the condition. It was amazing. I never heard of anybody going that high, but it worked.
Yeah, I think vitamin D, there's been just vitamin D is in the news all the time. Wow, it's amazing. And hopefully we'll hear more about vitamin D next month when Bill Grant gives his talk. But vitamin D in fractures is tremendous. I mean, this reduces the risk of fractures, which of course is, you probably know in older people, a major cause of death is breaking your hip, and 50% of the people don't last a year after they break their hip. It's hard to understand what that whole process is, but I guess being immobilized for that long, your body just kind of falls apart for lack of use or something. I don't know what it is, but anyway, Dean, did you want to come?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We noticed on several of the people that were trying these magnetic pads that she said that they were gaining in bone density. So we did a pilot study and had dramatic results. So then we did a major study at John Wilson down in Asheville. And we were disappointed because one group had dramatic improvement and the other group had no improvement at all. And when looking at their records, the one thing that we found that everyone who did not gain in bone density had better than 7 micrograms of mercury in when they did their toxic metal test. So mercury is definitely a big factor here. And so what we're doing now is having these people chelated and then treating them, and we're growing bone very easily with the magnetic pad. Now, why does it do it? We've also found that the magnetic pad upregulates upregulates progesterone. And that goes back to where you were here a little while ago. And so that's probably what's causing it. We don't know that. But there's another more complicated mechanism here. Whenever you're under stress, the body pulls calcium out of the bones to go into the cells to keep the intercellular potential up. And if you're under long periods of stress, well, you'll definitely decrease the bone density. And again, putting energy into the body, cleaning, getting rid of the toxins will get rid of a lot of the stress, and you'll be able to cope with it much better.
Okay, very good. Very good. That, by the way, our speaker there was our speaker for the evening, Dean Bonnie, so we can be hearing more from him later. Anyone else want to comment on this progesterone issue? Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
If you're taking all that vitamin, units of vitamin D, does she take something with it to complement? That's not
You know, there's you got to be careful with vitamin D. You can take too much, but it doesn't happen very often. It's almost always the other way around. But I don't think you have to balance vitamin D.
Calcium, magnesium.
There's other things that would work with it, but I don't think it's a problem of balance like there is in many cases. But is that right? What?
Vitamin A.
Vitamin A? Okay. So you have to put some vitamin A. You can take big amounts of vitamin D. I guess you have to take some vitamin A with it. Yeah. Okay. Any other comment on this? Yes, Steve. This is our science advisor, Steve Flux.
One related comment doesn't deal with progesterone, but it does deal with bone healing from fractures. That it's been known for a long time that moving electromagnetic fields speed up the healing of bone from fractures. And this technology has been around since, I believe it was in the 50s. It probably predates to the 30s and 20s, but we don't probably hear about it. But there have been devices that have been built up where they're just simple coils of wire that are placed near the fracture. And healing times are typically half of what they are in people who don't have that. And so that may be one of the principles involved in using magnets and moving magnetic fields around people, that they can then induce currents in the body. And we also know that in amphibians who can regenerate limbs, that regrowth of the limb depends upon the presence of a nerve that provides an electrical signal that guides the redifferentiation process of the limb. So again, I think moving electric fields and nervous system activity and external magnets can create these same pro-healing conditions.
Let me ask Steve, the presence of the nerve, if there's no limb, there's no nerve, right?
But there is a nerve. You know, at the point of the amputation, the nerve stops at the point of the amputation, but the nerve activity immediately adjacent to the amputation causes the cells to undifferentiate and then redifferentiate into the limb. It grows back out again, and the nerve itself grows back out. But if you take that nerve and you cut it off further up, the limb does not regenerate. Okay. The other thing I'd like to do is at the last meeting, somebody stood up and shared about biofeedback therapy, and I'm trying to find practitioners who do EEG biofeedback therapy. So if there's anybody who does, talk to me at the end of the evening, please. Thank you.
Great, that's wonderful. Okay. And by the way, this is a good place to network like that. If you have a question, you're looking for a particular kind of treatment or expertise, then this is a good place to ask for it, because all together we know a lot. Yes, sir, Richard.
In the last magazine, what is the one?
Which magazine?
About the vitamins and so forth.
Okay, just a minute.
They have all these. For this month, they have that sale on all the blood tests.
Oh yeah, lab extension. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody know anything about that? Is it really worth it? Which one should you get? And is there multiple vitamins real good too? That's the other thing I was wondering.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to know the answer to that question too. The question is, those of us who are get the stuff from Life Extension magazine, they have an ad this month, a special sale on their lab tests. You can get panels of tests and test results at a pretty good price, and I'm very much hoping that I get around to doing that. Now, anybody have any opinions on that? Now, let me ask you this. Yes, ma'am.
I did it in 2004.
I took advantage of the half price, and it actually, I believe, goes till June 15th, but you need to verify that. And I was quite satisfied with the test results. I ordered a lot more tests than my doctor probably would have, but at the half price, you can't beat it.
Right, right.
Does insurance reimburse you?
I didn't try.
No, not in the life extension, it's cash.
Yeah, I think you pay your own way. But now the other thing is, I just saw in Jonathan Wright's newsletter a reference to the fact that in the state of Washington, where he practices medicine, you don't need a doctor's prescription to get a lab test. And I'm wondering, in this state, do you need a doctor's prescription to get a lab test?
Yeah.
You do. Okay.
It's written on the form. When you order the blood tests from Life Extension, you get the form, and it has a doctor's signature on it. And then you take that to the lab closest to you, which they send you the information. So it is certified by a doctor.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would very much recommend. I mean, I'm with Richard on this. I mean, I think it's a very good idea to get this. You never know what will turn up, and it's just kind of, sometimes something will be out of line, You'll have 7 or 8 things measured, and one thing is just going to be out in left field somewhere, and then there's something to investigate. So I recommend, Steve.
Even if you pay cash for a medical test, you can still apply for insurance reimbursement. However, they're not likely to treat you seriously, and if you push it, they're likely to abuse you and hassle you, and that kind of. It's just a kind of ugly process to go through. But if you can connect a clinical result from a test to a pathological condition that the insurance covers, theoretically you should be able to get reimbursement for it. So if you do a red blood cell trace mineral profile, and you find that you have cadmium and mercury in your system, and then you remove the cadmium and mercury with some therapy, and your medical condition for which they're treating you resolves, you can then make a case that that test was necessary for your care, your medical care.
What about the vitamin?
What was the vitamin part, Richard?
I was wondering, are there vitamins, multivitamins, good or what?
Oh, life extensions?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. They're great products in general, in my opinion. I spend a fortune with their company, so they better be good. But there's one product, I got a question from Lowell Holcomb during the month on resveratrol, which is really very important, wonderful stuff. There was something I passed out on at the last meeting. Resveratrol seems to extend life in a variety of living critters, and they keep getting higher and higher up the chain, closer to us. I think they found fish now that live longer because of resveratrol. And I can't remember if there's any mammals yet, but anyway, the mechanisms are such that there's good reason to believe that it'll help us live longer too and be healthier. Well, okay, so it might be a good bet to take the stuff. It's not very expensive. It's resveratrol. Well, so the question is, though, who makes good stuff? And it turns out that resveratrol is not very stable. And one of the things that concerns me, and in general I'm very positive about life extension products, but theirs just comes in regular old capsules, and I'm not sure that, if it's packaged in that way, it's still good after a couple of months. So there's other companies that do it more elaborately, and so that's something to look into. But if those of you interested in resveratrol, what was the name of the company that I suggested to you? Noel, do you remember?
I forget what it is.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Longevinex. Longevinex, right? Longevinex. Yeah.
There's a lot of studies on resveratrol, and really the best way to get it is still from wine, because the extraction process from the alcohol, no, really, all the studies that a group of scientists that I know of who have been working with Goranti and his group has shown that the wine has been the key factor from resveratrol. So I've been working with a company called Polyphenolics and extracting their grapes using their procedures and making it into a dry powder form, and it looks very promising. But you need to stabilize it with flavonoids, and quercetin is one of them. That's been also shown that it stabilizes resveratrol.
Okay, very good.
Red or white? Red or white?
Red, white, red.
Oh, red. It's
Gotta be red, white?
Yeah, and it's the major factors, the two proteins called sirtuin-1 and sirtuin-2 are now linked to longevity and also anti-tumor function.
I'm sorry, but doesn't red wine have the highest food content of any food source called?
Yeah, Cabernet Sauvignon.
Right.
What is it? Cabernet Sauvignon.
Right.
Has the highest. Yeah.
And it's a lot more fun than taking it.
The more the age, the higher the resveratrol. Like if it's a 2000 versus a 2002, you're getting more resveratrol. I'm not a wine drinker, but that's...
My vote's for red wine.
Okay. Yeah, and by the way, you know, there's tremendous biochemistry behind this. This is not just wild speculation or some kind of crazy idea. There's tremendous, as Bert Friedlander alludes to here, there's tremendous biochemistry, and they know pretty much exactly, you know, how this stuff works. In fact, as I think I passed this out last time, there was an article in the March issue of Scientific American on this very question, and about the last 2 pages of the article, you know, their articles are typically 5-6 pages, was all about resveratrol. So it's really, you know, here we are, one of our focuses is longevity, life extension. So this is something y'all should look into. As I say, it's not that expensive. Yeah, Barry?
You have this product too with life enhancement. It's the new Pegisamol, what you put subliminally under your tongue, and it's supposed to absorb 6 times more effectively than the other micro processes. At least they claim that.
This is just resveratrol?
Yeah. I've been taking it. I haven't noticed anything except it's chocolate flavored.
Okay.
That's a compliment, Phil.
Well, you know, chocolate's another subject we should delve into. But anyway, okay, there's a couple more announcements, and then we'll get on with things here. Let me see. I wanted to ask Carla Marie from Julia Ross's clinic. It's called Recovery Systems up in Marin. Remember, we had her as a speaker, a marvelous woman who uses amino acids as therapies for mood problems, depression and anxiety and so forth. So let's see, Carla, where are you? Okay.
Hi there. I just wanted to let everybody know that Julia is this coming weekend in Menlo Park at Menlo College going to be having a 1 or 2 day, depending upon your schedule, seminar. I do realize it's kind of last minute, but we couldn't quite get information down here in a more expedient manner. There are continuing education units available for naturopaths, nutritionists, other people in the healthcare field. If you're not familiar with amino acid therapy, it is really an amazing adjunct to whatever you're doing, because you can literally see within 15 minutes a change in people's mood, especially if they are crying or really upset or excessively depressed. You can actually watch the mood shift. One of the fun things about the seminar is that we do get to practice on ourselves. A lot of us have food compulsions, or we're just feeling a little bit off that day, or we have little things about our personality that maybe we're not disclosing to other people that we would like to maybe handle discreetly. And the seminar is a great place to practice, both on ourselves and in small groups where facilitators will lead people so that you can practice giving or assessing a person's need for the different amino acids, and then administering them, and having one of the facilitators, Julia, myself, or one of the other nutritionists, help you feel more comfortable using the amino acids. It's really a lot of fun. If you're, I'm sure probably most of you are familiar with either the mood cure or the diet cure. If you can't make the seminar and want to learn more about the amino acid therapy, of course we do complete nutritional workups with people and psychosocial, biological workups to make sure, of course, like there's not heavy metal toxicity. We do lots and lots of referrals to other practitioners. We're always looking for an expanding base of practitioners to refer to. We work with eating disorders, bulimia, anorexia. We work with dependency, chemical, alcohol, mood disorders, depression, bipolar, a wide range of things. So if you're interested, I've got some brochures. They're up at the front table. We would love to see you there, or just give us a call and get some more information.
What's the best website?
Let's see. It's
moodcure.com.
That's it. Yeah, she doesn't have this because there's too many other places in the country that have clinics that are too similar. So it is moodcure.com, and then there's all kinds of information.
Dietcure.com is another way to get in if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's going to be a good one. I'm kind of hoping I can get over there myself. And I think I'll tell you a little story. Although, you know, since we want to be good scientists, we don't want to put too much store in anecdotes. But this is an interesting one, and since there's a lot of great science on the use of amino acids, which are, you know, as those of you who are new, amino acids are pretty friendly, familiar kinds of stuff. They're just the ingredients of proteins. They're the things that proteins are made out of. So things like tryptophan and tyrosine and are amino acids. But here's the story. One of our members does research, and was having problems because he was kind of found that he wasn't very clear-headed a lot of times, and he just couldn't do the work he wanted to do. And that this was a fairly common occurrence in his life, and that the remarkable thing that he had noticed was that it was very closely tied to whether the sun was out. Now we all know that the sun can be a big influence in people's biochemistry, but his response to the sun was really extreme. And Steve Fox and I got together with the fellow and talked to him about, among other things, amino acids and tryptophan as a possible way to increase serotonin. And if he was deficient in serotonin, which is one of the major neurotransmitters, that would explain his problem in thinking clearly and staying organized. Well, he called me up a couple days later, well actually about a week later, he finally got around to trying the stuff. And he gave me one of these testimonials that was off the map. I mean, he said, Phil, I'm a new man. I feel like that fellow in the movie Awakening. I mean, it's like, I'm here again. And then I said, well, that's fantastic. Let's check in. I want to check in on this in a couple days, in a week or so, and see if it's holding up. And I sent him an email, and he said, yeah, it's holding up. He said, I was thinking I'd have to move out of California because it was been so cloudy so long, but even these cloudy days don't bother me anymore.
What's he taking?
He's just taking tryptophan.
Tryptophan.
Go to the health food store, get a bottle of tryptophan, and it's fairly expensive, unfortunately, but 500 milligrams, he takes one of those and does the job for him. And 5-HTP was also helping.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was going to say, because some people are benefited more by tryptophan and others by 5-HTP, I guess, in the way the body converts it, right, Steve?
Yeah, Steve, by the way, is one of Julia Ross's sources for this.
Tryptophan and 5-hydroxytryptophan both make serotonin in the brain. So they're, on some level, equivalent. 5-HTP is more powerful, crosses the blood-brain barrier better, and so typically you can use 1/10 of the amount, but it tends to be a bit pricier, and so which one is actually going to work best for you? You might want to try both and see which one works best. There are special circumstances, though, that can make the selection for you. For example, tryptophan is a growth factor for certain bacterial and parasitical infections. So if you are an AIDS patient and you have toxoplasmosis infection, stay away from tryptophan because it'll bloom. Tryptophan is the rate-limiting amino acid in the human blood supply, and so your body will drop the tryptophan concentration in response to an infection, which will produce depression and aggravate seasonal affective disorder. So for those kinds of people, 5-hydroxytryptophan is definitely better. However, if you don't have an infection, the problem with 5-HTP is that it bypasses the rate-limiting step for serotonin synthesis, and because you swallow it and it goes into your intestine has serotonin-driven muscles that produce peristalsis, and it drives the food to your digestive system. So you can become hypermotile and develop diarrhea and other kinds of similar cramping in the gut in response to 5-HTP that you don't get at all from tryptophan.
Now you know why Steve is a science advisor. He's been following us for the last 10, 12 years, I think. And thank you, Steve, for being with us all these years and hanging in there. Okay, now let's see. I think that does it. Let me just check my list here. Yeah. Oh, Jim Siegels. Where's Jim? Jim, where are you? There he is.
I just wanted to bring to your attention, I got this yesterday, that the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists 15th annual meeting, April 26th in Chicago, is going to be discussing the importance of vitamin D and problems associated with vitamin D deficiency. And then one other little paragraph here, you'll be interested. Originally known as a vitamin that aids the body absorption of calcium, current studies have drawn attention to the role it plays in maintaining good health and preventing disease. Now, most of us haven't thought about that. Some evidence suggests that a deficiency of vitamin D may be associated with many chronic diseases, including some common cancers, autoimmune disease, and type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, and cardiovascular disease. Now those things just, we haven't thought. Oh, one thing relative to hip fracture. The work and research that I've done is that, let's say 99% of all hip fractures, the individuals were vitamin D deficient. So everyone here, are you taking it?
Right.
Everyone.
How much? How much?
Ask Bill. Give the mic to Bill.
Yeah, I would say 2,000. Would you say that, Bill? 2,000 a day? Yeah. Yeah, Mike.
What Jim doesn't realize is Bill Grant not only gave this lecture on vitamin D and said everything that he mentioned that we don't know about, but he's been doing this for the last 2 years, and they're just awakening over there. So Bill Grant talked about this at the World Nutrition Conference 2 years ago.
Well, you know, Bill's been a pioneer. In fact, he kind of, in a way, revitalized this whole, a focus on vitamin D in ways that by going to conferences, as an independent researcher, and there are damn few of them in the world, believe me, because most researchers either rely on university funding, which is great, or pharmaceutical company funding, which isn't so great. And sometimes the line between the two isn't so clear either. But Bill is doing his own thing, and he's done studies that are so provocative that he's gotten other people to take another look at some things, and all of a sudden it's blossomed. In fact, the biggest news I'm going to tell you about next month when I have the pleasure of introducing him as our speaker. But there's a big Harvard study out that I'll just give you the bottom line. The bottom line is this Harvard study done by the best people at Harvard, Walter Willett and Meyer Stamfer, and the lead author on this particular study is a guy by the name of Gio Vannucci, right? And what they did is they tried to assess people's vitamin D status, considering 6 different variables, and they determined that if every American had a proper amount, an adequate amount of vitamin D in that person's system, there would be a 29% reduction in cancer deaths in this country. 29%. 29% of cancer deaths in this country means that 85,000, this is their number that is in the study, this published by Harvard, 85,550 people would be saved every year. And so we're going to be talking about this more next month, but I mean, this is something that's absolutely tremendous, and Will Whittle's working on getting the Mercury News to do an article on it. This should be front page news.
Why don't you have Bill hold up his hand in case people might have a question during the break?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's Bill Grant.
Want to add anything, Bill?
Yes, I'd like to put in a plug for T. Colin Campbell's book, The China Study, and the appendix is on vitamin D. And the main part of the book talks about the ecologic approach I use, which is looking at diet and disease in various countries and doing statistical correlations. And that sort of forms the basis for the talk next month. But I will tell you that I'm finding that there are benefits in eating animal products as well as eating vegetable products. So hope you come next month and find what the differences, what the trade-offs are.
Yep.
And try to buy this book if you can, do your homework in advance.
Right. Bill was good enough. I asked him if he would please do something else for us, and that is get a hold of a bunch of copies, which he did, and we sold most of them last time, but there's still, I think, about...
We have quite a few here.
5, is there just 4 or 5, is that all?
Yeah, $20 each. I will autograph it for another $20.
And that's the last of the hardcovers. I talked to the publisher, and they said we're ending at the hardcovers, going to softcover now. So
wow.
It's become popular. So if you want the hardcover.
Okay. There's still more. There's more in the box. So everybody ought to get a copy of this book. This book is dynamite. Really good science. Very well written. So, by the way, on the subject of books, now, did you all pick up a copy of this thing on cancer and nutrients over here? That's something that I'd like to have you all get a hold of. The book is kind of expensive. Little paperbacks. It's published on demand for $32, but it's a pretty amazing book. And so at some point maybe we can talk about that too. Yes, Diana?
What are the men using now for prostate health? Because there's a controversy on the saw palmetto. Is there any, what's going on with that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question is, what's the story with what are men doing now for prostate health, and what's the story about this research on saw palmetto? Anybody want to respond to that?
Castration.
What's that?
There's something new that's just come out, and this is up in Canada now, and this came from the Indians. And they told one of my friends, a fellow who used to work for me, he said, you know, we don't have any problem with, enlarged prostates and problems like that. And what we do, we go up to the high altitude and get the bark off the balsam trees. And this is the balsam fir. And we take that and we dry it, and we boil that in about 5 gallons of water, and we drink that water. And all you have to do is drink a glass of that a day, and you'll never have prostate problems again. Now, that's from the Indians.
Wow, pretty good start. I mean, saw palmetto is an herb, so why wouldn't balsam maybe has the same chemical in it? Anybody else want to respond to that question?
Iodine.
What, Bill?
Iodine? Left.
Zinc is very crucial.
Yes, sir. Okay, one of our new members. Tell me your name again, sir?
Bruce McLaren.
Bruce McLaren from Ted Ringer's office.
Thanks. Actually, somebody beat me to the punch a little bit. When David Brownstein spoke here a couple of months ago, I think in January, he commented that both breast tissue and prostate tissue have rather large concentrations of iodine when there is an iodine sufficiency in the body. I've personally been using iodine for a while and found that I actually had to go through a detox, and I developed an eczema condition from the detox, and by cutting down the amount of iodine I was taking, and taking antihistamines and putting some cream on it, those have largely gone away now. But I'll be interested in seeing how that goes. I've had a prostate condition which is resolving in the right direction at this point. I also use a new life extension product that is a silymarin product where they've identified an active component that's effective in prostate disease, which is psilocybin B. And it's a little higher price, but it comes in 900 milligram capsules, which is a real solid dose of milk thistle along with this special psilocybin B. I also take curcumin. So those are things all of which I have read supporting research that it contributes to prostate health.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Let me add one more caution, and that is many doctors in the U.S. believe, I think falsely, that testosterone is linked to prostate problems. And I think it's the other way around. A lack of testosterone is linked to prostate problems. And so I caution men with prostate issues to monitor their estrogen levels when they monitor their testosterone levels, so that they can see that when they supplement testosterone, it doesn't convert into estrogen. And I think estrogen is probably, in men, a much bigger risk factor than anybody currently acknowledges or understands. And that this is probably, estrogen control is probably how iodine helps.
What about zinc as far as prostate health? For some reason, it seems to me somewhere I read that zinc was very important. Has anyone heard this?
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, I tell you what. I can see what this is a very important and really interesting subject, and it has a lot of relevance to practically every man in the room probably. But I think we better not pursue it right now, because I just looked at my watch and it's 5 after 8, so we're running a little bit behind. But zinc is something to look into. I just say one more thing, and that is, there was a study that just came out in the last couple of months saying, well, salt palmetto didn't work all that well. And it was one of those, every time the study comes out saying something doesn't work, it gets a lot of play. But there's hundreds of articles which show that it does work. And I saw a very good critique of that study that said it didn't work, and they were using the wrong dose or something. I can't remember what it was, but I think Julian Whitaker had it in his newsletter or something. He had a nice critique of it. So I think salt palmetto is still something useful. But I think we should go on now. Now, we had a short report lined up for tonight by a gentleman who couldn't make it at the last minute. And so Mike Cork suggested that maybe Bernd Friedlander could step in and give a short report. And I think we'll do that, but the thing is, it's going to cut in a little bit into Dean's talk. But is that okay with you, Dean?
As long as the people will stay.
Okay. Well, we go until about 9:30. Is that okay? Now let me. If it's all right with everyone, I'll now bring on Brent and give you a little background on him. Bernd. Sorry. Bernd is the only guy I know whose name Bernd is Bernd. B-E-R-N-D. And he has a kind of avant-garde practice, doing some chiropractic stuff, some health medicine, and he himself was an athlete in his youth, and of course he's still young compared to most of us, or at least he looks younger, which must be 58. So I mean that's a good testimony because he looks like he's about 45. But anyway, he was in the top 10 in the 100 and 200 meters, and then he played soccer in college and also professionally after that. So then he was the coach and trainer of the couple, I guess for 3 years for the U.S. Olympic track team. And he's also, for those of you who know him, a wild man. He's the guy who's on the edge. He lives on the edge. I think he lives for the edge, I would almost say. And so I've asked him to kind of like try to tone it down for us so that we can follow him. And he's an idea man. So with all these caveats, I bring up one of our favorite wild men, Bernd Friedlander.
Wow. Thanks.
I think, Harry.
Just going back a little bit,
I got started really in the 70s working with the U.S. Olympic team, and I was given a position to actually look at how we can accelerate healing and also improve performance. So we started the first alternative to steroid program. And I want to say something about amino acids. That was the secret for increasing performance. We had over 30, 40 athletes, gold medalists. Jackie Joyner, Florence Griffith Joyner, Carl Lewis. These are the athletes we trained, and I personally worked with Howie Long and the Raiders and the Rams and the Lakers. So amino acids were essential with CoQ10, gamma-rhizanol, ferrolic acid, all those things. And if Frank Summerfield was here, he'll tell you. And we're still doing that. Amino acids is a secret. And I'll talk about something more important, that you've got to get a book called Cells and Gels, The Engine of Life by Dr. Gerald Pollack, an incredible human being, brilliant scientist. He's taken what Gilbert Ling and what Ray Peat has been talking about for the last 20 years and taken it to another level. And I've been fortunate enough to do research on that area right now, because I do a lot of research, which is not known to the public a lot. And I do a lot of, and I treat a lot, and I also involved with 5 universities on research on cancer. And I'm going to tell you something about vitamin D. It's essential. The National Cancer Research Foundation for the last 10 years have been following a program that we developed for them. And the FDA came down on us. They actually came down and came in and they looked at our program. And 14 days later, they evaluated everything. And they asked us to change some verbal words on the website and how we can market and program. The head of the FDA said we have the only program that he's ever seen that successfully treats cancer, and he brought his family over. And that's the National Cancer Research Foundation out of New York. And I've been associated with them in the production of certain formulas with them. But I want to share something very exciting, and I don't know if you've got the literature or the article by the National Health Federation's recent, what is the one that they put out? The
Health Freedom News?
Yeah. I provided some information to them on something that is involved in Israel by Institute of Technology. And it's called Disruption of Cancer Cells Replication by Alternating Electrical Fields. It goes back because I was given a grant, and I don't want to share who gave me the grant. In 1978, I met with the family of Rife, and I actually was presented by the microscope and the Rife device, and we worked together with the World Research Foundation, Steve Ross, Laverne Ross, and Dr. Strecker, who you might know, and we actually looked at Rife and actually identified what he was doing and why it was working. And what excited me was, ever since then, and I was introduced to a fellow by the name of Robert Becker, Body Electric. And Robert Becker came over and worked with us because we were working with athletes, and we actually applied AC and DC fields, low intensity DC fields, and we actually stimulated cartilage repair, bone repair, and we done a lot of work with magnetic fields. And Dean and I go back, I don't know, quite a long time, because I've been doing a lot of magnetic therapy, and I used to apply magnets on Howie Long and all these great athletes, Sylvester Stallone when he had injuries, Steven Seagal, all these people have magnetic fields on them to repair whatever injuries, and it does accelerate the healing. And one of the things I do in my office, I apply this technology right now that the Israelis have done with the magnetic pad, and I'm telling you, we're seeing amazing results with fibromyalgia, hepatitis, and cancer, and diabetes, and it goes beyond that. And we're recording, and Richard Cunning has asked me to make a presentation to his group because he was there in my office with Dr. Brad Wicks, and they evaluated 40 of my patients there and questioned all the patients that went through there. And each patient, they reviewed Elizabeth Maloney. She had hepatitis with a high viral titer count, and it was gone in 3 treatments totally. Fibromyalgia in 3 treatments totally. All pain symptoms were gone. And so he wants to now, Richard has asked to be involved with us and to do a study on what we're doing with the alternating electrical fields and infrared fields, etc. And What this article really says, by applying low-intensity alternating fields between the ranges of 100 to 300,000, they have completely arrested cancer cells in both animals and humans. They also have shown that they can disrupt cancer cells and destroy them while they're going through cell replication during that division process. It's very simple and easy. I have a patient, 3 years old, optic glioblastoma of the nerve, total blindness in one of the eyes, going through chemo, 3 years old, Michael Dooley. A report just came back using an MRI showing that the cancer, the tumor growth, has completely stopped. The oncologist, neurologist called the parents in and says, what are you doing, because this was a fast-growing cancer cell. And using her sense and understanding, she says, we're working with nutritional and some other application. Because I've asked them not to really, divulge all these things right now, because you're on a touchy situation with anybody. But they were amazed that in